Have you ever wondered if everything happens for a reason, or are some things just random happenstance? Let's take a look at this verse, Romans 8:28, where the Apostle Paul writes, "We know that all things work together for the good of those who love God, those who are called according to his purpose." So no, I think it is the choices we make. Everything does not happen for a reason. But no matter what happens, God is present, and he will always find a way to bring something good from the bad. This is my opinion. What do you say about that? Imagine this. You're walking down the street when you spot a penny on the ground. You pick it up, and later that day, you find out you've won a small lottery. Coincidence? Or is it a sign of something more significant? Our lives are filled with events that seem too serendipitous to be mere coincidence. A chance meeting with an old friend when you were just thinking about them. Seeing a recurring number everywhere you look. These instances make us question whether there's a hidden pattern or meaning behind the seemingly random events in our lives. This is where the concept of coincidence comes in. A coincidence is a surprising concurrence of events, perceived as meaningfully related, with no apparent causal connection. It's the universe's way of playing a cosmic joke, where unrelated events are seen as intricately connected. And yet we can't help but wonder, is everything really just a coincidence? Or does everything happen for a reason? This is where the human mind gets really interesting. We have a natural tendency to search for patterns and meaning in everything around us. It's how we make sense of the world. We look for connections, we seek patterns, and when we can't find them, we create them. We try to fit the pieces of the puzzle together, even when there might not be any puzzle to solve. So, here's a question for you. Could there be an underlying psychological reason for this? Could our brains be hardwired to seek out patterns and make connections where there are none? Perhaps you've never heard of the term apophenia before, but it's a concept that might explain a lot about how we perceive the world. Apophenia. It's a mouthful, isn't it? But it's a simple concept that carries deep implications. Let's break it down, shall we? Apo hails from the Greek language meaning away from, and phenia pertains to showing. Put together, it's all about showing something that's away from the norm, or simply finding patterns where they may not exist. Now, you might be wondering, what does that look like? Well, it can take many forms. Have you ever stared at a cloud, and instead of seeing a random puff of water vapor, you see a distinct shape like a bunny or a heart? That's a form of apophenia, often referred to as pareidolia. It's your brain's way of making sense of the nonsensical. Or maybe you've experienced something like this. You're thinking about a friend you haven't spoken to in months, and suddenly they call you. It's easy to think, wow, what a coincidence. But that's your brain again, drawing a connection between your thoughts and an unrelated event. This is another example of apophenia, and it's something we all do, often without even realizing it. Apophenia isn't just about seeing faces in clouds or thinking about a friend right before they call. It's a fundamental aspect of how we understand and interpret the world around us. It helps us find meaning and order in the chaos of life, even when that order might not actually exist. But here's the catch. Just because we perceive a pattern doesn't mean it's really there. Our brains are wired to find connections, even when they don't exist. It's a survival mechanism, a way for us to quickly make sense of our surroundings and respond accordingly. So the next time you see patterns where there might not be any, remember the word apophenia. It's our brain's fascinating way of making the world a little less random and a little more understandable, even when it's leading us astray. Now, you might be wondering why our brains behave this way. It's a great question. So let's delve into the fascinating world of our minds and try to understand this intriguing phenomenon. The human brain is a pattern recognition powerhouse. From the moment we are born, our brains are wired to seek out patterns in the chaos of the world around us. It's a survival mechanism, really. Picture our prehistoric ancestors living in an unpredictable and often dangerous environment. The ability to recognize patterns, like the rustling of leaves indicating a predator's approach, or the path of stars leading to seasonal changes, could mean the difference between life and death. This pattern-seeking behavior is what helped us evolve and survive as a species. Fast forward to modern times, this instinct to identify patterns is still very much a part of us. It's why we see shapes in the clouds, faces in inanimate objects, or find meaningful connections in random events. This is apophenia in action. It's our brain's way of making sense of the world, trying to find order in disorder, meaning in the meaningless. But why do our brains insist on finding patterns even when there aren't any? Well, our minds prefer certainty over uncertainty. In a world filled with randomness, our brains crave order and predictability. They use these perceived patterns to construct a narrative, a story that helps us understand and navigate our world. This narrative gives us a sense of control, a feeling of security, even if it's based on imagined connections. In essence, apophenia is not a flaw in our cognitive processing, but rather an inherent feature of our minds. It's a testament to our brain's incredible capacity to adapt, learn, and make sense of the world around us. So the next time you find yourself seeing patterns or connections where none exist, remember, it's not a sign of delusion. It's your brain doing what it does best, making sense of the world and trying to keep you safe. So, our brains are hardwired to look for patterns, even when they don't exist. It's all part of being human. While apophenia has its roots in our survival instincts, it also has a downside. Now that we've covered what apophenia is and why our brains tend to do it, let's delve into the darker side of this phenomenon. Apophenia, while fascinating, can lead us down some rather murky paths. One of these is the creation of false beliefs. When we're constantly searching for patterns, we can sometimes find them where they don't actually exist. For instance, you might start to believe that every time you wear a certain shirt, you have a good day. While it's a harmless belief, it's not grounded in reality. It's simply your brain playing tricks on you, trying to make sense of the world around you. This pattern-seeking behavior can escalate even further, leading to the development of conspiracy theories. These are complex webs of false beliefs, often involving powerful entities supposedly manipulating events. Conspiracy theories are usually fueled by a lack of trust and high levels of anxiety, but they're also a classic example of apophenia in action. Our brains are trying to connect the dots, to make sense of situations that seem chaotic or threatening, but in doing so, they can create narratives that are far removed from the truth. This is why critical thinking is so crucial. It's our defense against the darker side of apophenia. Critical thinking helps us differentiate between real patterns and perceived ones. It encourages us to question, to analyze, and to demand evidence before we accept something as true. Without it, we're at the mercy of our own pattern-seeking brains, which can lead us to believe things that simply aren't true. So, while our brain's pattern-seeking behavior can be helpful, it can also lead us astray if we're not careful. Understanding apophenia and the role it plays in our lives is the first step towards harnessing its power for good, while also guarding against its potential to mislead us. So, does everything happen for a reason? Or are we just seeing patterns where there are none? Over the past 10 minutes, we've taken a deep dive into the intriguing concept of apophenia, the human tendency to perceive connections and meaningful patterns among unrelated or random things. It's a fascinating psychological phenomenon that can have both positive and negative implications. We've learned how our brains are wired to seek out and create patterns as a survival mechanism. This pattern-seeking behavior is the reason we see faces in clouds or hear hidden messages in songs when played backward. It's also why we might believe in superstitions or conspiracy theories. But remember, while our brains are excellent at detecting patterns, they're not always accurate. Sometimes we see patterns where none exist. This is where apophenia comes in. It can lead us to erroneous beliefs and even harmful actions if not properly understood and managed. In our quest to make sense of the world around us, it's essential to be aware of this tendency and to think critically about the patterns we perceive. Are they real, or are they just figments of our imagination? Are they helpful, or could they lead us astray? This awareness and critical thinking can help us avoid the pitfalls of apophenia and use our pattern-detecting abilities to our advantage. It can help us make better decisions, be more creative, and live more fulfilling lives. As we wrap up, consider this. Have you ever believed something happened for a reason, only to realize later that it was just a random occurrence? Or perhaps you've noticed patterns in your life that turned out to be meaningful after all? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you experienced apophenia? Share your experiences in the comments below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more thought-provoking content. Thanks for watching.